the fact that the president, that is to say, Mr. Morales, has long enjoyed overwhelming support in the countryside, where vote tallies are generally delayed, with rural citizens frequently traveling significant distances to cast their ballots. In fact, of the 106,925 new votes counted in Cochabamba by October 22nd, Evo Morales won by 52.2%, his rivals 35.4%. Pretty much a landslide from where I sit. Lacking a smoking gun, Londoño instead turns to public perceptions to substantiate the fraud allegation. The accusations of fraud created a widespread sense that the president and his allies had worked behind the scenes to rig the vote. And then the author says it
How can you hear an echo? I'm not saying
was only
anything.
concerned about popular opinion.
I wasn't saying anything.
Coincide with Western establishment wisdom. Should have put that in quotes. Londoño cited no such, quote, widespread sense, unquote, in Chilean society that President Sebastian Piñera is a Pinochet-style butcher whom the majority think should resign and uh, calls new elections early. This kind of shoddy reporting is anything but accidental, given that Evo Morales, uh, unlike Sebastian Piñera, is no friend of Washington, as the U.S.'s local allies have repeatedly tried. This kind of shoddy reporting is anything but
I'm not playing any recordings. Can you hear me, everybody? Do I still have an echo? Hi, Cheyenne. How are you? Hi, Steve. Hi, Lana. Hi, Russ. Thank you for the previous comments. I've tried to adjust. How's the echo right now? How about now? Please give me some feedback. So, how's my sound right now? Sounds better. There was a tape running at 9:17. No, there was no tape. Not as far as I can tell. How about now? Russ says 9:18 sounds good. Okay. If it sounds good, I'm going to continue and hope for the best. First, okay, so the big news tonight is people have finally realized that there's a Bolivian coup that, okay, is going on. A lot of this is attributable to the gray zone and the work of Ben Norton of the gray zone, okay, and Anya Parampil, okay, as well. And they're spreading the news that it was a military coup and could hardly be called anything else. Also instrumental in spreading the news was Mark by Weisbrot of the Center for Economics and Policy Research here in D.C. Yeah, turn it back on, please. He is the co-director of the CM PR. Cheyenne says, I'm heartbroken over Bolivia, so I'm going to pass this discussion. I've been posting all day and I'm exhausted. Okay, Cheyenne, thanks for coming, and thanks for letting us know you've been posting all day. And Steve says, I love your show, Doc. Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that. Oh, that was Bonnie turning off the lights to see how it looked, so I thought that I would rather have at least some lights in the back. Anyway, thanks for your comments. I'm going to go now to... Oh, by the way, I'm here for the In-Depth show, and of course I'm Joe Firestone, as I think you all know by now. So, I am going to change my view now and go to Weisbrot's article in The Nation. And go through that for you. Should be over here now. This was actually written on November 8th, but 3 days ago. Title of the article by Mark is The Trump Administration is Undercutting Democracy in Bolivia. And that, of course, is absolutely true. Let me get rid of the extraneous matter. Adjust the view a bit so you can see it better. So the Organization of American States is controlled by a diverse group of nations, so they're viewed as having some impartiality. But from time to time, the U.S. has wielded a disproportionate amount of influence inside of, the OAS. But right now, Washington is paying 60% of the expenses, of the OAS. So, as is said by Mark Weisbrot, it could theoretically be a coincidence that both the Trump administration and the OAS have tried, without offering any evidence, to discredit the national election in Bolivia in the past couple of weeks. But it's more likely that this dangerous, ugly, and destabilizing operation is being pushed by Washington. Absolutely, absolutely. You can't fail to have noticed that the opposition to the Venezuelan regime, the opposition to Lula da Silva and his party um, um, in Brazilian politics, the opposition to the uprising of the people, okay, in Chile, that all this has to do with the United States trying to control regimes in our hemisphere and in country after country working against the manifest will of the people and working on behalf of the elites and often on what can only be described, okay, as oligarchies, much smaller in size than the oligarchy here in the United States, even, but very, very limited oligarchies in terms of number of people who have control. Okay. Anyway, on October 20th, the Bolivians went to the polls to choose their president and Congress. Evo Morales, the country's first indigenous president, in a country with the largest proportion of indigenous people in Latin America, was on the ballot before re-election. His main opponent, former President Carlos Mesa, is vastly preferred by the Trump administration. Why is he preferred? Because he's a member of the oligarchy and basically is certain to loot the resources of his country on behalf of the U.S. Companies, the multinational corporations, if he takes over. So he, of course, is vastly preferred by the Trump administration. Since Evo Morales was elected in 2005, okay, the U.S. government has been hostile. Okay, and also Bolivia has not had ambassadorial relations with the United States since 2009, for 10 years. Evo Morales is one of the last remaining members of a cohort of independent left presidents who have been opposed and in some cases removed with the help of the United States. When the official tally was done, he had 47.1% of the vote. Mesa was in second place with 36.5% of the vote. This meant that he had won the presidency without going to a runoff because the rules allow for a first round win for a candidate that gets at least 40% of the vote and a 10-point margin over the closest competitor. The opposition cried foul, however, long before the votes were counted. Carlos Mesa had already indicated he would not accept the decision of the electoral authorities if he was not going to win. What is more surprising and disturbing was the press statement from the OAS the day after the election. It expressed, quote, deep concern and surprise at the drastic and hard-to-explain change in the trend of the preliminary results after the closing of the polls, unquote. But it did not present any evidence for its questioning of the election results. This is an outrage for an electoral observation mission, as anyone familiar with such procedures knows. An official inside this mission, they cannot be named here because they are not authorized to speak for the mission, expressed concern about what this would do to the reputation of the OAS. Hours before the OAS press statement, and even longer before the votes were counted, Senator Marco Rubio stated falsely, quote, in Bolivia, all credible indications are Evo Morales failed to secure the necessary margin to avoid a second round in presidential election, unquote. That was absolutely false. It was false on its face at the time. Why did Rubio say that? Because Rubio is working as basically an external propagandist for Trumpian regime change throughout the whole of Latin America. This was just another case where he uses his contacts in the CIA, okay, and in the White House to get talking points. He also alleged, without evidence, that there was, quote, some concern he will tamper with the results or process, okay, to avoid this, unquote. Talk about tampering with process. What were the Republicans doing all through the elections of 2016? And through some of the elections of 2018 also. They were highly visible. But it's okay when they do it. It's not okay when anybody else in the world does it. Trump, now, I'm not saying, okay, that Evo Morales did anything, by the way. Not conceding that at all. Trump administration officials followed with similar statements. So Rubio is just the advance guard. The potentially violence-promoting claims of the OAS, which echo those of Rubio and the Trump administration, have driven much of the media coverage and serve as an anchor for those who want to discredit the election. For those who bothered to look at the data, the 34,000 tally sheets signed by observers are on the web. It was clear that the increase in the share, okay, of the Morales votes in later returns was simply a result of geography. In other words, his support is much stronger among rural and poorer populations, and their votes come in much later. Such a geographically driven change in vote margins is not that uncommon in elections, as anyone who has watched the election returns on television in the United States knows. And this change wasn't even that big of a shift. The official data show a gradual change in the margin between the candidates as the mix of returns changed over time. The OAS mission pointed to a pause in the quick count as though it was cause for suspicion. This is an argument that no election observer should ever make. The quick count is not an official count and does not have the same safeguards. It has never been promised nor intended to give a complete result. It is done by contractors, private contractors, who take photos of the tally sheets once they've been publicly certified by local electoral jurists and upload the results via a mobile application so as to get partial results out faster. Where are these contractors? Well, obviously they're in the urban areas. They're not in the rural areas. There were perfectly legitimate reasons for the government to stop the quick count when it did. In a highly polarized situation that includes violent attacks on electoral facilities, it may not be a good idea to continually update two sets of election results, which differ significantly because of procedures in what appeared to be a close election in terms of the sought-for margin of 10 points. Opponents of the Morales government and its political party, the movement towards socialism, MAS, have also argued that Evo Morales should not have been able to run for election. Their arguments are that the Constitution forbids it, that in a referendum held in February 2016, a 51-49 majority voted not to allow the president and vice president to run for another term. But in December 2017, the nation's highest court ruled against term limits, regardless of what anyone thinks of it in Bolivia as in the United States. The court's decision is the law of the land. For many of those trying to overturn the results of the presidential election, including the Trump administration and its allies, the end justifies the means, and the rule of law is not a consideration. This political intervention by the OAS has implications beyond the Bolivian situation. It is understandable that many journalists see the OAS electoral observation mission as neutral and take its statements as reliable. They usually are. But this is not the first time that OAS officials put their fingers on the scale of an election or a result under U.S. pressure and with horribly violent results. In the national election of 2000 in Haiti, the OAS at first decided that it was, quote, a great success for the Haitian population, which turned out in large and orderly numbers to choose both their local and their national government, unquote. But the OAS later changed its position as Washington sought to destabilize and topple the government there. Paul Farmer of Harvard's Medical School, who later became President Clinton's deputy special envoy for Haiti at the United Nations, testified in 2010 to the U.S. Congress about what happens next as the U.S. government, quote, sought to block bilateral and multilateral aid to Haiti, having an objection to the policies and views of the administration of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, choking off assistance for development and for the provision of basic services, also choked off oxygen to the government, which was the intention all along to dislodge the Aristide administration. The OAS's unjustified change of position on the 2000 Haitian election was vital to the regime change operation of 2004, in which the first democratically elected president of Haiti was taken to Africa on a U.S. plane. Thousands of people were murdered following the coup, and officials of the constitutional government were jailed. The OAS also intervened in the Haitian election of 2010, doing something that perhaps no election monitors had ever done. They reversed the results of the first round without a recount or even a statistical analysis. Looking forward, in Bolivia, the government invited the OAS to audit the election results, and an OAS team arrived on Thursday for a 10 to 12-day visit. There are some voices within the OAS, such as the Mexican government, who have criticized what the OAS has done so far, and we can only hope that a few governments can keep this latest mission honest in the face of pressure from Washington and also the governments, the Brazilian and Argentinian governments who favor regime change in Bolivia. However, pushing Evo Morales out will not be easy. After 13 years of some of the most successful economic policies in the hemisphere, he remains popular. During his presidency, income per person in Bolivia has grown at twice the rate of the Latin American average. Poverty has been reduced by 42%, and extreme poverty has dropped by 60%. By the way, results similar to the ones that have been gotten in Venezuela by the Chavista regime in that country. What could be most important right now is for members of the U.S. Congress who are against this regime change operation to weigh in. Marco Rubio and the Trump administration can influence the OAS, partly because Washington provides about 60% of the organization's budget. But the U.S. Congress approves that funding, and there are people among the OAS staff and member governments who believe in keeping the organization's electoral observation functions honest. These people need all the help they can get by right now. So that was Weisbrot's article on November 8th, anticipating the events since. Now I begin to go over some of these events by moving to an article which appeared on, actually today, on the 11th, in Common Dreams, written by Jake Johnson, their staff writer. And the headline, it's a global condemnation of appalling coup in Bolivia as military forces socialist president Evo Morales to resign. And allow me to get rid of the extraneous matter here. There we go. Evo Morales was forced to resign on Sunday under threat from the nation's military, police forces, and violent right-wing protesters. That's fascism, boys and girls, who have burned and ransacked the homes of members of Evo Morales' party, assaulted supporters of the president, and kidnapped a Bolivian mayor. So political leaders and activists around the world immediately denounced his ouster as a military coup that actually leaves Bolivia without a constitutionally elected government. Williams Calaman, the chief commander of the Bolivian armed forces, pressured Evo Morales to resign earlier Sunday. Okay, and here's a quote from Evo Morales. This is not a betrayal to social movements. The fight continues. We are the people, and thanks to this political union, we have have freed. Freed Bolivia. We leave this homeland freed. And quote again. The coup mongers are destroying the rule of law, he tweeted hours after announcing his resignation in a televised address. And he said that he and his vice president, Alvaro Garcia Linera, resigned because they, quote, don't want to see any more families attacked, under orders from right-wing former President Carlos Mesa and opposition leader Luis Fernando Camacho. His resignation came following his announcement early Sunday that he would hold new elections after the U.S.-dominated Organization of American States questioned his October victory and claimed the vote was fraught with irregularities. Trump administration officials and Republican lawmakers like Senator Marco Rubio were quick to parrot the OAS. The role of the U.S. cannot be ignored, Code Pink wrote in an email to supporters on Monday. Quote, the State Department has been actively opposing Evo Morales since 2001 when it sought to weaken his political base. This was 5 years before he was elected president. Since that time, the U.S. has funded his political adversaries, including civic groups in eastern Bolivia that attempted a coup in 2008. And there's a quote from Weisbrod here, who said on Sunday, tweeted on Sunday, that the OAS, quote, never did find any evidence of fraud in the October 20th election, but the media repeated the allegation so many times that it became true, quote unquote, in this post-truth world. And there's a tweet from Weisbrod, which basically says the same thing he said, in the Nation article that I just read to you. Former Brazilian President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, who was freed from prison Friday after spending more than a year behind bars on politically motivated charges, was among those who denounced the coup in Bolivia late Sunday. And he said, quote, there was a coup in Bolivia and Comrade Evo Morales was forced to resign. It is unfortunate that Latin America has an economic elite that does not know how to live with democracy and the social inclusion of the poorest, unquote. And I have to add, it's not the only economic elite that does not know how to live with democracy and the social inclusion of the poorest. We have an economic elite in this country that's right there with those kinds of attitudes, and that is trying to block right now the political activity of people who have aligned themselves with the middle classes and the working classes. And you know very well what I'm talking about, and you know very well who I mean, including their latest presidential candidates, the 52 billionaire Michael Bloomberg, who has just declared his candidacy for the presidency. A chorus of leaders in Latin America and across the globe echoed Lula. Jeremy Corbyn, the UK Labour leader, said Sunday that, quote, to see Evo Morales, who along with the powerful movement has brought so much social progress, forced from office by the military, is appalling, unquote. And, quote again, I condemn this coup against the Bolivian people and stand with them for democracy, social justice, and independence, unquote, said Corbyn. And U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, the Democrat, came from Minnesota, tweeted Sunday, quote, there's a word for the president of a country being pushed out by the military. It's called a coup, unquote. Yes, but it's even more, it's called a military coup. There are other kinds of coups as well. There's a word for the president of a country. Okay, so she tweeted that and also added, we must unequivocally oppose we must unequivocally oppose political violence in Bolivia. They deserve free and fair elections. The resignation of Evo Morales did not bring a halt to right-wing violence, the Washington Post reported. Quote, socialist officials denounced the ransacking of Evo Morales' home late Sunday. According to the Post, the former head of the Electoral Tribunal, whose name actually Maria Eugenia Bashoke, was detained, the police said, unquote. In the midst of widespread chaos and concerns for the safety, of Evo Morales, the government of Mexico said it would grant the ousted Bolivian president would grant him asylum if he requested it. Quote, in Bolivia, there is an ongoing military operation. We reject it. It is similar to those tragic events that bloodied Latin America in the last century, said the foreign minister of Mexico, Marcelo Ebrard, late Sunday. And he said, quote, Mexico will maintain its position of respect for democracy and institution. Coups, no. So Jake Johnson was writing up there the events of Sunday when the coup happened. Moving to this country, Ocasio-Cortez joins chorus of critics condemning coup in Bolivia that forced out socialist the president. And she was speaking during a meeting of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. Oh, that was where that picture was taken from. Sorry. Anyway, she said on Monday that she joined the growing chorus of voices across the globe condemning the resignation of Evo Morales as a coup. As Common Dreams reported earlier on Monday, he was forced to resign on Sunday under threat, but from the nation's military, police forces, and violent right-wing protesters. And Ocasio-Cortez tweeted in both Spanish and English on Monday afternoon, "What's happening right now in Bolivia isn't democracy, it's a coup." And she said the people of that country deserve free, fair, and peaceful elections, not violent seizures of power. And her comment echoed that, okay, of Ilhan Omar, a fellow squad member who had weighed in on Twitter late Sunday. Ocasio-Cortez was thanked by progressives, quote, for breaking the deafening silence, unquote, and encouraged Senator Bernie Sanders, who Omar and Ocasio-Cortez have endorsed, before the 2020 presidential nomination, okay, the Democrats, issue a similar statement on recent developments in Bolivia. And within 2 hours of Ocasio-Cortez's tweet, Sanders took to Twitter to express his concern about what appears to be a coup in Bolivia. "I'm very concerned of what appears to be a coup in Bolivia, where the military, after weeks of unrest, intervened to remove Evo Morales. The U.S. must call for an end to violence and support the democratic institutions of that the country." Washington, D.C. based independent organization Just Foreign Policy responded by thanking Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, and Omar for standing up for Bolivian democracy, unquote. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted Sunday that he, quote, fully supports the findings of the OAS report that recommended new elections in the South American country. And President Donald Trump on Monday called the resignation, okay, of Evo Morales, quote, a significant moment for democracy in the Western Hemisphere. Of course, to comment on it, it was a significant moment for further gains by fascism in the Western Hemisphere. Throughout today, all kinds of journalists and advocacy groups on the progressive side continue to condemn the coup, and the U.S. media outlets reporting on it, who were basically parroting the administration. Where is the resistance here? Where is the resistance among the media of the U.S.? All they do is to parrot the Trump administration. Whenever it comes to foreign policy, they talk about a resistance. They talk about impeaching Trump. Look, intervening in the elections in Bolivia and supporting a coup, that's an impeachable offense by itself. By itself, that's an impeachable offense. There's literally not a single thing about the violence and military rule taking place in Bolivia that's about a restoration of democracy. Everything that's happening is about an end to democracy there. A classic coup. It's astonishing the U.S. media outlets won't call it that. That's because the U.S. media outlets, I tell you true, folks, they are operating in a pre-fascist phase. If fascism wins in this country, the mainstream outlets in the media will bear much of the responsibility for it. Much of the responsibility. Uh, okay, another tweet, this time by Code Pink. This is a coup. Help defend the voting autonomy in Bolivia by asking your senators to demand an investigation into U.S. involvement in the coup and urging the UN uh, an electoral mission from the UN to monitor a future presidential election in Bolivia. So this post did not originally have a statement from Bernie, but it was updated with a statement from Bernie. So let's get some more details on that. Calling for an end to violence, quote unquote, Bernie Sanders becomes the first 2020 Democratic presidential contender to criticize the Bolivian coup. This was written by their staff writer, Owen Higgins. And you heard already what Sanders tweeted his concern about what appears to be a coup in Bolivia. And he expressed support for the end of violence and supported democratic institutions in Bolivia. And Walker Bragman tweeted that Bernie had become the first of the presidential candidates to condemn this. And Common Dream says the Vermont senator's comments came after a day of mounting pressure to speak out from his left-wing grassroots movement. As Common Dreams reported earlier on Monday, Bernie supported Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who condemned the coup in no uncertain terms. Sanders' expression of support for Evo was welcomed by supporters. And, quote, by far the biggest difference between Bernie and the rest of the Democratic candidates is how well versed he is and how much he cares about the type of international left issues that, say, the Nation writes a lot about, said reporter Matthew Zeitlin. And earlier Monday, Sanders released a new plan to help the veterans, held a town hall with veterans in Des Moines, Iowa, and published at Jewish Currents an essay on combating anti-Semitism. And so he did. Okay, I'm going to go back to my basic view now and check you out and see what your comments are. So, like the doctor, but I'm sleepy. Good night. Steve says Cheyenne is so cool. And Randy Hedgebeth has joined. Brett Ensley has joined. Deborah Wilson has joined. And Russ says, very Chicago boys on the liberal dictatorship as per Hayek. And Margot Shepard has joined. Ernest Jones has joined. Hi to everybody. And Steve says, like the doctor, but I'm sleepy. Good night. Sorry, I thought I was talking too loud for you to get sleepy. And Steve says, shared. Thank you, Steve. Kathy Langan has joined. And also Jody Fier has joined. Hope I said that right. Karen Reese has joined. And Jimmy Sunderland has joined. Hi, Karen. Hi, Jimmy. And my daughter Devore has joined. Hi, honey. Sherry Weiss has joined. Hi, Sherry. Also, Dolores Pierce has joined. And Dolores says, hi, all. Not many comments tonight. Please grace me with some more comments. In the meantime, while I'm waiting, please share, like, and subscribe, and please become a patron at www.patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. Thank you, thank you. So, hopefully you'll have some more comments for me. Well, while I'm waiting, I'm going to come forth with another article. This one on some further outrages by the Trump administration. This is an article from November 8th, and it also appeared in Common Dreams. It was written by Andrea Germanus, who's another staff writer for them. And the headline is, "The Pentagon claims that we, the U.S., have the authority to shoot any Syrian government official who tries to take control of Syrian oil." It's incredible, right? Right? Another violation of international law. Right under our nose. Are these violations not impeachable? Evidently, Nancy Pelosi thinks they're not impeachable. Or she doesn't want to impeach Trump for that. Anyway, Pentagon officials asserted Thursday that U.S. authority over Syrian oil fields had authority over Syrian oil fields because U.S. forces are acting under the goal of, quote, protecting Americans from terrorist activity, unquote. That is ridiculous. What Americans are in the oil fields to protect? The only Americans in the oil fields, to protect are the U.S. military who've occupied the oil fields. And he's basically saying our military has a right to defend itself, even though we have no authority to be there in the Syrian oil fields. That's Pentagon double talk for what is going on there. But the claim is it would be within their rights to shoot a representative of the Syrian government who attempted to retake control over that country's national resource. Now, this is outrageous and a total violation of international law. I'm telling you, the United States is becoming an outlaw nation in the rest of the world. The only thing that stops it from being treated like an outlaw nation is our size and our military power, and the fact that our allies in Europe rely on that power. That's what's going on here. The comments came from Pentagon spokesperson Jonathan Hoffman and Navy Rear Admiral William D. Byrne Jr. during a press briefing in which the two men were asked repeatedly about the legal basis the U.S. is claiming to control the Syrian oil fields. The briefing came less than 2 weeks after Defense Secretary Mark Esper said, quote, "That's our mission, to secure the oil fields," unquote, okay, in the Deir ez-Zor area of eastern Syria. President Donald Trump's comments before and after that remark, quote, "We're going to be protecting the oil and we'll be deciding what we're going to do with it in the future," unquote, and, quote again, "The oil can help us because we should be able to take some," unquote, were seized on by critics who claimed Trump was suggesting violating international law by plundering another country's resources and openly saying the U.S. was pursuing war for oil. Yes, I'd say he wasn't suggesting violating international law. He's been doing it. Hoffman, in his comments Thursday, gave a different message that, quote, "The revenue from this is not going to the U.S. This is going to the Syrian Defense Forces," unquote, referring to the Kurdish-led and U.S.-allied Syrian Democratic Forces who are battling ISIS. Byrne claimed that the U.S. has been waging the oil field control mission alongside the Syrian Democratic Forces, and that the goal was to prevent ISIS from obtaining the oil revenue. Now, this comes after ISIS was finished, and then the ISIS prisoners were allowed to get free because the U.S. left its posts defending the Kurds. Our military left and exposed the Kurds to an invasion by Turkey, which forced them to abandon the prison camps they had going for the ISIS prisoners. This is just incredible. This is double think. The whole thing is double think. It's all propaganda. We just want to occupy the oil fields and we want to overthrow the regime in Syria, come what may. We don't want peaceful solutions. We don't know how to get any peaceful solutions anymore. We have degenerated into nothing but a decadent force on the world stage, relying only on military interventions and military force. But as one reporter pointed out, ISIS fighters, quote, "have no army. They have no aircraft," unquote. Quote, "Do they have the ability to actually seize the oil fields?" the reporter asked. "And isn't this really about Russia and Syria seizing those oil fields?" unquote. I wonder. Hoffman replied the goal was, quote, "to prevent the resurgence of ISIS, which would be facilitated if the terrorist group had access to the oil revenues. To prevent the resurgence of ISIS, it would have been really good if the United States had not exposed the Kurds to attack so that they had to flee those prison camps themselves, simply allowing the ISIS prisoners to get free. When the Pentagon officials were pressed on whether the U.S. have the authorization to shoot if a representative of the Syrian government comes to the oil field and says, quote, "I am here to take property of these oil fields," unquote, Byrne said, quote, "Our commanders always retain the right and obligation of self-defense when faced with a hostile act or demonstrated hostile intent. But the Syrians don't retain their sovereign rights over the oil fields, right? There's no hostile intent there. They're just coming to take possession of what is Syrian property. We need to get the hell out." The officials were reminded by a reporter, didn't Trump say he was getting out when he left the Kurds exposed? Didn't he say he was getting out? He didn't say he was going to the oil fields, that he was going to take the oil fields, did he?
The officials were reminded by a reporter that the government of Syria is still based on international law, the recognized legitimate government, unquote. Hoffman said, quote, everyone in the region knows where American forces are. We're very clear with anyone in the region working to deconflict where our forces are. How do you deconflict where your forces are? If anyone, we work to ensure that no one approaches or shows hostile intent to our forces, and if they do, our commanders maintain the right of self-defense. Hoffman later said the oil field mission couldn't be separated from the fight to defeat ISIS. Yes, and the withdrawal, exposing the Kurds, couldn't be separated from the fight to defeat ISIS, could it? Operations in, quote, Syria are done under the commander-in-chief's authorities, too, with regards to protecting Americans from terrorist activity. More bullshit. There are no Americans to protect, other than the soldiers themselves who are occupying the freaking oil fields. Pressed again by a reporter about, quote, the legal basis for the U.S. military to take and control the natural resources inside the boundaries of another country, unquote, Hoffman responded, the legal basis for this comes under the Commander-in-Chief's authority for us to be conducting counterterrorism efforts against the ISIS. And I get your point when you're trying to decouple the ISIS issue from the Syrian issue, but it is not a decoupled issue. Later, unquote. Later, Hoffman was asked by a reporter if, quote, President Trump has legal authority to take over these oil fields, or is the United States stealing the oil, unquote. Hoffman then repeated his stance. The operations were part of the effort to defeat terrorists and stopping ISIS from obtaining the oil fields in an effort to prevent them from obtaining revenue so they can fund their terrorist operations globally, unquote. The Pentagon official also appeared to push back against the notion that the mission to control the oil fields is new. Just to be clear, we've been in this area with the same mission of stopping ISIS from getting those oil fields for the last 4 years. No, we haven't had control of the oil fields for the last 4 years. It was the Kurds who were controlling those oil fields. So he lies. He says, this is not a new mission. Everybody seems to believe that has changed. That is not the case. It is the case. The U.S. forces may also stay with that effort for years to come, Hoffman suggested. They're going to steal the Syrian property for years to come. Quote, we're committed, to the defeat of ISIS, and we're committed to staying in the region, quote, unquote. Boy, that's the first I've heard of that. I mean, Trump said, only last month that he was getting out of Syria, didn't he? He was going to bring the troops home, right? I thought I heard that. Did I hear wrong? When were we committed then to staying in the region or to staying in Syria? But Hoffman says, quote, we're committed to, in this particular case, having troops in Syria in a way that helps us to continue the de-ISIS mission as long as we believe it's necessary, unquote. Now, the administration went into Syria without the authority of Congress, with no authority to fight a war there. It just did it. The Obama administration did it. And then the Trump administration continued it. And that was a violation of international law and a violation of the U.S. Constitution because only the Congress is supposed to declare war. The authority under the AUMF was not sufficient for the president to move into an entirely new country and to maintain a war there. And now to seize control of the oil and refuse to turn it over to the legitimate authorities in that country? That's ridiculous. There are so many grounds here to impeach Trump, and the damn Democrats are ignoring these grounds. This is totally illegal. I'm telling you, folks, we are living in a situation where we are marching towards fascism. And this is measured not only by the pronouncements of Trump and not just by the violence we see in our body politic at present. This is also manifested by the Congress refusing to exert control over the president when under the Constitution it has that obligation to control the president. Funds should immediately be withdrawn from the effort in Syria. There should be a resolution that immediately passes the Congress, not just a resolution, but a law revoking the AUMF immediately. Getting our troops home as quickly as practicable. We need to get the hell out of there because our continued intervention is feeding the growth of fascism in this country because it is lawless. And it's a demonstration that the president can be lawless without consequence these days. That he can violate the Constitution at will. We have to stop this, or we will have created a moral hazard that this country will never get over. And our so-called experiment in democracy will be over. Just like we're ending it in country after country after country. We need a lawful regime to come to power here, to take over our government and to end these continuous lawless practices in foreign policy. Because these lawless practices have begun to come home. And the longer we allow this to go on in our foreign policy, the more and more these methods and the forces that are engaging in these foreign interventions will come home to bite us and to take away our liberties with the full establishment of an authoritarian regime that can be controlled by no one, and least of all by us. So, I think that's going to be my last one for tonight. So let me go back and see whether you have had any more comments. Randy says, it seems my entire 83 years has seen the U.S. actions in South America. Well, not only South America, Randy, but also in the southern parts, okay, of North America, in Honduras, okay, in Nicaragua, Panama, of course. Russ says, I've got to call it a night, Joe. See you again soon. Thank you, Russ. Pleasure to see you, and I hope that you will see me again soon. Well, I don't have too many comments. So, I'll give you a chance to say a few more or ask some questions that have been on your mind. And while I give you that time, let me just remark that I don't know if you've been watching Bernie campaigning, okay, in Iowa over this weekend, but I think that this campaign has really taken off. It's been partly with the assistance, okay, of AOC, of course, and the magic created by the combination of the two, but just as much, it's been through Bernie's town halls in town after town with
smaller groups where he asks for and gets the personal stories of people about the experiences they're having with our current healthcare systems. When he gets to listen to them and he gets to respond, to them, and when they get to voice their problems, which they normally don't talk about with other people, they feel isolated. You can see the collective aspects of the movement for Medicare for All continuing to grow and continuing to gain force. And you can see that when it comes to Medicare for All, more and more people are becoming convinced that the only one who's really serious about Medicare for All and who will fight for it, hammer and tongs, will fight for all of us until it's passed, is Bernie Sanders. He's the only one who's going to do it for us. So we need to have solidarity with him. We need to join with him. We have to continue to get behind him day after day. We have to work on the Congress people. We have to work on the candidates. But we have to work with other people in town halls and meetings of this kind to spread the real facts about what the Medicare for All bill is going to do and what it's going to mean for most of the people of our country. The greater financial security it's going to give us, the greater physical security and safety it's going to give us, the longer lives that it's going to give us. The insecurities we've been living with for so long when it comes to healthcare will be gone. Will be gone if Bernie becomes the president and if he gets a Congress sufficiently progressive to go along with what he wants to do. Now, I'm not saying Bernie's legislation is perfect. I'm not saying that he's going to pass that particular legislation. In introducing the legislation into the Senate, he wanted some co-sponsors, so he needed to compromise. So he sat still for a 4-year transition in his Senate bill. But there is another bill in the House, H.R. 1384, introduced by Pramila Jayapal. And H.R. 1384 has a 2-year transition, which even then, for my money, is too long. But if it's a 2-year transition, most of us can probably live with it. There will be some fatalities among those who still don't have insurance the first year. But at least the 55 and over people and the 18 and under people will be fully insured with the Jayapal bill for all sorts of things, including nursing home care. So you will no longer have to go bankrupt if you have to go into a nursing home. If you go into a nursing home now, you're going to have to pay down all your assets before it's covered by Medicaid. But under H.R. 1384, if you have to go into a nursing home, it won't cost you a thing. It won't cost you a thing under H.R. 1384. No premiums, no copays. no deductibles. It covers everything Bernie's covers, but the transition period is shorter, and it doesn't cover only long-term care at home. It covers long-term nursing home care as well. Hi, Hal. My brother Hal is here, and Mad Hildebrandt is here too. Hi, Mad. I still hope you're running this year. And Jim Bird has joined. Hi, Jim. Any other comments, questions, or statements? If not, it's also my time to call it a night. I'll give you 30 seconds to introduce some questions or comments. Jim says, hey, Joe and all. Hi, Jim. That's good, but it doesn't count as a comment or a question. Okay, everybody, I hope you're having a great night. I certainly am. This is just in time to say goodnight. Yeah, it is just in time to say goodnight. So good night, all. I'll see you tomorrow night. I'll be back with something else important, okay, that's going on. Probably something else outrageous that's going on. Because it always seems like there is something outrageous going on right now.